The normalization of cannabis is
that really a thing?
As Chelsea Handler, I was interviewing her for a story we did recently. She's starting her own cannabis line. She said, if we can normalize what's happening in Washington, D.C. right now, we can normalize cannabis. And I thought that was probably a good, no matter what your politics, probably an apt
I'm not sure
metaphor.
which one's going to be more difficult.
Yeah, exactly. Cannabis is probably easier. So let's start, origin story. Let's talk about the Dixie Brands origin story. We mentioned that it started as a garage operation and it's expanded to this, 5 states now. Tell me, is it 6? 6 states? 5 states?
We're operating in 5, and soon by the end of the year, we'll be operating in 6, yes.
Terrific. So take me from how you got from the garage operation to where you are right now.
Sure. Well, a long journey, and you don't get to look like this without having to put a few miles on, and especially in an industry like this. But it all starts with people, John, right? And so you're never going to build a company, whether it's in a garage or it's in a massive facility, without having really top quality people as part of the foundation. Once you start building that foundation of people, then of course you need money. And so you got to start lubricating the business with money, and that's no different than today, as people are out in this industry always raising money. That's part of my job as a CEO, right? I was always fundraising, frankly. But when you have the two of those things, then what you're starting to look at is building repeatable processes, building standard operating procedures, building high quality formulas, building defensible IP. And as you start to get those things in place, now you can move from a small operation to a much bigger operation, because from our perspective, we're just a commercial food manufacturer. We just happen to use a weird ingredient called THC. But as a commercial food manufacturer, we got to make sure that that product is exactly the same every single time, no matter where it's made or sold. And that's a little bit more challenging in the cannabis industry, since it's kind of fragmented on a state-by-state basis.
Yeah. But why did you choose to be in the THC CPG business? You have a background in real estate, right? What was behind the genesis of your decision to kind of cross over to the cannabis side of things?
Yeah, my background, if you go in the Wayback Time machine, my background really was in corporate America, both finance and then moving into sales and marketing. So I have a pretty broad breadth of experience in larger, more corporate organizations. I then moved into more of an entrepreneurial bent, where I started a couple different companies, smaller companies. One succeeded, one failed. You learn as much or more from your failures as you do from your successes, frankly. And then I did move into the real estate business. But I had have a partner, business partner, and we decided to enter into the cannabis space in Colorado. For full disclosure, I couldn't actually invest in that company in the early days because I wasn't a citizen of Colorado, and that was what the regulations were. However, I was able to provide some sweat equity and intellectual capital, I guess, to my partner to help build what now is Dixie, but in the early days was a licensed producer in Colorado. And frankly, for full disclosure, we got into it much more as a passive investment opportunity. However, that changed. Passive went to active very quickly, both because we invested capital, but also because we started getting these incredible testimonials. People were using our products, and it was really changing the way they were approaching their lives. Whether it was that they were substituting it for alcohol or they were using it in replacement of opiates. One story, kind of almost brought us to our knees, of a PTSD veteran who was hooked on opiates and alcohol and started to use our drink product, and sent us pictures and letters and things that really kind of told us, hey, this isn't all just about making money. It's about the power of the plant and helping people. And then we were all in at that point.
I hear this story a lot. I hear people get into the business maybe just for financial reasons, maybe originally, and then when they actually see the plant as medicine and how it really helps people's lives, it kind of changes their whole perspective. And I think that is actually part of the normalization, is realizing that it's not just like the next big thing or the next kind of hot stock or whatever, that it actually is a game changer in people's lives.
Sure.
So was it literally a garage operation? I mean, were you like working out of a garage, growing, or like how small was it?
It was very small. It was this was before Amendment 64, so it was still the caregiver model. So it was kind of analogous to, we had 24 bottles and we filled them up with some infused tea, and we went and sold the 24 bottles to the caregiver, got that money and went and bought 48 bottles and filled those up, and then sold 48 bottles, and then we're able to buy 96, if I'm doing the math right. But it then started to quickly grow from there because we were able to attract some talent. Amendment 64 was passed, so the medical marijuana regime came in place. My partner, again, being the citizen, Canadian or Colorado citizen, was able to apply for and receive a license. And at that point, we were legitimately in the business at that, under the legal regime. Then, as everybody probably knows, 2012. We voted in Colorado to approve recreational cannabis. That started January 1st of 2014. And so we literally went from 100,000 patients in December of 2013 to 1 million consumers in January of 2014. That was a heck of a ride. And in March of 2014, the entire state ran out of marijuana. So that was also challenging, but that's normalized now.
Called Oregon, yeah.
Yeah, well, right, and frankly, not wishing ill will because we're there, but that's probably going to be Michigan too. Right? Michigan's going to be recreational in January of 2020, and the infrastructure and the supply capacity just isn't going to be there day one to satisfy the demand that we know will occur. But as we do in this industry, we'll adapt, we'll figure it out, we'll move forward, and we'll ultimately be successful.
So you talked about the bottles starting at 64, going to 96, et cetera. What do you think it was? Why were people buying your product? There were other products on the market, so how were you able to differentiate yourself in a way that people recognized? And
early days, there were certainly products and competitive products. We kind of like to call it co-opetition because I never forget the very first MJ Business Conference we went to, which is so much bigger now, and not to talk about a competitive event, but I think it's analogous to this great event here and the number of people. There were maybe a couple hundred people at that event, and most of us were vendors. And so, talk about people selling each other. Like, when I'm not buying anybody else's stuff and they're not buying mine, there wasn't a whole lot of traffic at that. But now that's grown, just like, this event grows and continues to grow and be relevant and important for the education. But, I think that in the early days, much like we are today, our heritage was always about providing safe, reliable, and consistent product. So even in the early days, we triple lab tested every single product that we sold. Even though we weren't required by law in Colorado to do so, we did it anyway because we wanted to make sure that the consumer knew what they were getting. And it was imperative to us that whatever that said on the bottle, if it was 100 milligrams, 50 milligrams, or 10 milligrams, that's exactly what they were getting. And the quality of that product was the same, because it doesn't do you any good to sell a product once. You got to sell it over and over and over again. That's how you build a brand. So for us, we were just fiercely loyal to compliance, testing, product safety, and formulation.
Yeah. Talk to me about being consistent, because I think that is something that's very unique to the cannabis industry, is that the consumer wants to make sure that they have the same experience every time they have that product. So if I drink or if I eat an edible cookie, I'm not going to get a little bit higher this time because it's not, the dosage is a little screwed up. But I think it's a very important and sort of a big part of a successful business. So talk to us about about consistency and how you guys have managed to, make assure that it's consistent each time.
Sure. I think one of the, potentially fortunate things for us is that we actually built the business in Colorado. If I'd have built the business in California, we'd probably have much bigger revenue numbers because it's a much bigger marketplace at the time. But Colorado had, and I would argue to this day, is still one of the most rigorously compliant states in the cannabis industry. So they required us to be at a level of compliance that caused us to make sure that we always had to do it right. And so not only was that child-resistant packaging and incredible compliance on labeling, but it was also the homogeneity of the product and the formulation that said that if you're saying that there's 10 milligrams in this gummy or there's 100 milligrams in this drink, it's got to be within a 15% tolerance one way or the other, or you can't sell it and you have to destroy it. That's pretty hard to do, especially in the early days. You're not a pharmaceutical company. Frankly, pharmaceutical companies' tolerance in some drugs is 20%. So our industry has actually got a higher tolerance in many cases, or a lower tolerance, if you will, in many cases than the pharma industry. So we had to learn very early on, John, how do we make sure that that first sip of the product is exactly the same dosage as the last sip, and that first bottle is the exact same as the 1,000th bottle that came out of that batch. So the state required us to do that, but our science team and our formulation team and our adherence to really stringent SOPs and good manufacturing procedures allowed us to do that.
I just want to talk about how you branded Dixie, because obviously even the name Dixie, how you came up with the name Dixie Brands. Because if we're talking about normalization, a lot of it is the way it's presented to the public, and branding is everything. We're all dealing with the same plant, maybe different strains, but we're all dealing with the same plant. So in the end, it's really about how you brand and how you present yourself to the public. And tell me even the origin of Dixie Brands. I mean, you could have named it like 420, or plant power, but you didn't go that route. Like, you didn't go the old school, all due respect to our legacy friends, you didn't really go that route, right? The OG thing. So talk about the origins of Dixie Brands, which sounds more like a kind of happy, Southern, I don't know.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, that's a great question. By the way, somebody called me an OG once, and I thought it stood for old guy, so that kind of tells you me. Again, the way we got into the industry is my partner came to me and said, I want to make an investment in a cultivation. And I said, cultivating what? And this is back in, again, 2009, 2010. Yeah. And I said, cultivating what? And he said, cannabis. I was like, well, I don't even know what that is anymore. And then he came back to me and said, well, maybe not that, but I found this company that they're making some infused teas and they could use some help. And the company's name was Dixie.
Okay.
And it was actually called Dixie Elixirs and Edibles. And it was very old school cannabis, had a big pot leaf and all kinds of things that were much more reminiscent of that time. And what we liked about it is that it was a brand, or we thought we could build a brand, and we thought we could build a portfolio of products under this brand. We weren't married to the name at all, but what we ended up doing is hiring a creative design firm to help us build an identification for what this company was going to be. And they leveraged off of the existing name as opposed to changing it for the storyboards. And so that logo you see up there was one of about 10 different logos that they came up with. And we looked at it, and we didn't think of any connotation of the South or anything like that. We said, that thing really looks good on a hat.
Yeah.
And it's something that kind of, when you look at a logo, you want to actually look at it more than once to say, what does that say? And then as soon as you actually recognize what it is, you'll never forget it. So that's kind of what, iconic things do. They become burned in your memory, and then they're easily identifiable. So we decided to stay with it because, again, it looked good. We thought we could build something around it. And then we added brands to it in 2014 when we moved the company from just being a producer in Colorado to actually being an IP branding and marketing company that would take all of this incredible IP that we had built over the time and now use it to deploy in other states and soon other countries. And so Dixie Brands actually stands for the fact that we are building a house of brands, a CPG house of brands. And in all candor, Dixie will probably be just a subset in terms of that portfolio of products. We have other products such as Synergy and Mindset, and in our CBD line, Therabis, which is our pet supplement product, which is a fantastic company, Acesso Hemp, which is our wellness platform for CBD for humans, and soon, a brand icon that will be familiar to the Arizona project as we get that launched and off the ground.
Well, that's a good segue to my next question. So there was some announcement in the press that you had a letter of intent from Arizona. We all know Arizona, the tea company, for a partnership. And I know there's not much you can say, at this stage, but tell us a little bit about why that is significant to your company, to the industry in general.
Sure. Well, I think that this chat that we're having is, a giant leap toward normalization. So probably nothing exemplifies normalization more than having a very familiar CPG company entering into this industry, into this space, and whether that's Arizona or another famous brand, that familiarity breeds confidence in people. And if you look at the size of the market now and the consumers that are entering into the cannabis space, the fastest growing segment, it's 50 years and older, and it's skewing more females. So, those folks are coming into this industry looking for an alternative to either their consumption from a social perspective on alcohol or maybe their use of pharma drugs for wellness. So they're looking for something alternative in cannabis. So that familiarity is going to breed confidence. Mm-hmm. That confidence is going to ultimately breed loyalty if you deliver on that brand promise. And then from my perspective, that loyalty ultimately turns into revenue.
Yep.
And so we're very excited about the opportunity to partner with Arizona. As you may have seen, or some folks in the audience have seen, we issued a press release today that announced that we were extending the time frame to get to final agreements with them by 45 days. And so we're working very hard to make sure that we're building and structuring this right so that it's 100% compliant. There are no questions or concerns on either side, so that when we launch, we can launch with great confidence that we're doing this the right way.
So the idea is that, and you tell me what you can say and what you can't say, but the idea is that you are distributing an Arizona brand that would be an infused Arizona brand?
So the concept of the partnership is that we will be developing a infused portfolio of products that will have some derivation of the Arizona brand associated with it. And those are part of what we're trying to work together on in terms of what branding that we use, what is the name, the nomenclature, the look and feel, and also the product itself. But again, more importantly, we're in this business for a long time. I've been doing it for 10 years. We expect this industry to be generational. I'm not in a hurry to get the deal done just for the sake of getting it done. We're going to get it done when we get it done right, and our partner is comfortable with it, and we're happy with it, and that we know we can both be mutually successful.
So the brands that are under your house of brands, your umbrella, are they developed internally, or do you go out and find them? Do they come to you? How does those partnerships work?
Sure. A little bit of both. In the past and up until the recent past, it's been mainly innovated in-house. We have an incredible innovation team. We use innovation as a weapon. We right today have about 13 different delivery vehicles that span about 100 SKUs or individual products. I kind of joke that if you can eat it, drink it, or rub it on, we already make it. So that's important because we already have those products in market generating revenue. We already understand the formulation behind it. So what that allows us to do as well is be very meaningful to a brand that might be out there, whether it's a new brand wanting to enter into the market or an existing brand that might be in a single state. And they can come to us and say, look, we understand you're good formulators. We understand you understand the manufacturing process. We know that you understand how to manage the routes to market from sales and marketing. We'd love to work with you to extend our brand or to build a brand for us that you can then put on your platform. And that is either the regulated THC side or, again, our two hemp-derived CBD wellness companies.
And do you help them normalize? Do you say, here's what we advise for you to appeal not just to the regular cannabis user, but to the canna-curious consumer, right? The person who, is interested in the plant, but has never necessarily tried it or has heard about it, but has not tried it yet.
Well, absolutely. And if you look at, again, where the market is moving, it's not moving to how high can I get as quickly as I can get high. it's moving to how can I use these products and this plant again as an alternative to many things that I normally use. So there's a movement to microdosing. And I think you'll see that movement continue. Dixie has always been, even before microdosing was a thing, we've always looked at low-dose products, like our mints, for example, which are very approachable, 5 milligrams. We actually have a 2.5 milligram combined with CBD as well. So it's all about people being comfortable and being able to titrate their dose, if they will, understand what their consumption patterns are, and understand how they can use it in a social environment for a lot of sessionability. So if you think about a drink, very few people actually can drink 100 milligrams of THC in one setting, or they're laying on the ground behind the couch. Where I think the beverage industry moves is more of a low-dose product, where you can use it just like you would have a couple glasses of wine or a couple cans of beer, and you're doing it in a very social setting where you and John and I are sitting here and we're having a couple cocktails together. But we exactly know what that's going to do to us, and we don't have to worry about are we drinking all of it at one time and having a bad experience. So. Yep. I do think the industry will move as normalization occurs to being very analogous to the alcohol beverage space.
So you mentioned microdosing as an opportunity you see, or a trend that you see coming, or that's here that's going to just expand. What are some other opportunities if you're an entrepreneur looking to get into this business, or already in the business but are looking to kind of get a leg up? What are some of the opportunities you see right now in the business that are maybe not as mined as other things?
I still believe brands ultimately will help rule the day, again, because people have become familiar and have confidence with brands. And yes, they're going to go try other competitive brands like we all do in our normal daily life. But if they have something that they like, that they're loyal to, that they believe in the consistency of it, the value proposition is right, they're always going to come back to the brands that they know and trust. I think that as you extend that out, and there's many folks here in this auditorium, the ancillary businesses are important too. This is a nascent industry still. So, we need all the picks and shovels as well as, the direct to the plant or the direct plant to the consumer type products. So you see, data mining systems, like BDS, for example, and other data aggregating systems. This industry needs the power of the data to be able to understand where the consumer wants to go. And, like our friends in Canada say, skate to where the puck's going, not to where it was. Mm-hmm. So, we need some of those technologies to continue to evolve that will help our industry evolve and become more mature. And again, I think that's a very quick path toward normalization when that occurs.
Yeah. How close do you think we are to it being national, or at least THC or cannabis being legal nationally? Do you make predictions? Do you have a sense? There was a big legislation, the Safe Banking Act, passed in the House a few days ago. Do you keep track of that stuff? Tell me what your sort of opinion is on all that.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't make predictions anymore because I'm 100% wrong all the time. Even when I'm right, I'm wrong, I think. So, look, Dixie is a founding board member of the Cannabis Trade Federation, CTF. We've been at the forefront from a lobbying perspective at the federal level for the States Act. Also extremely focused and dedicated to helping with the Safe Banking Act, which, as you said 2 days ago, passed the House. That was historic. It was the first pro-cannabis legislation that's ever passed a branch of Congress.
Right.
And it passed overwhelmingly in a bipartisan way. Yes, there were less Republicans that voted yes for it than voted no. However, there were a lot of Republicans that voted yes for it. That puts it in really good position, I think, to have a favorable outcome in the Senate this year. That's a massive move toward starting to normalize this industry if we have access to banking and we have access to lines of credit and we have we're not afraid of losing our own personal bank accounts and investment accounts because we're in the industry. All those things make it a lot easier for us to really build a responsible industry. I did predict, John, in the past that I thought there'd be a form of legalization by the end of 2019 because I was counting on the States Act to actually get through this year prior to the election next year in 2020. Probably not going to make that, but if I had to guess, I'd say some form of the States Act, in whatever form it ultimately ends up, will be enacted before the election next year, and then that's going to allow us to not have this punitive tax code that we're subjected to, the 280E tax code, which is also a real headwind for the industry.
So you've been in business a while and led many successful organizations. What was the best advice you ever got as an entrepreneur or as a business person early on that you've used that has helped you to this day? Not to put you totally on the spot here.
No, that's good. I'm smiling because there's so many. Again, you learn more from your failures than you do from your successes sometimes. Mm-hmm. Somebody told me one time, and I actually have a quote up in my office, "Be not afraid of sudden fear." So don't panic. We live on the tip of the spear in this industry, and there's always an opportunity every single day that, to panic, because this is not a straight line to the end zone. Whether again, it's, I've personally lost my bank accounts and my investment accounts over the last 9 years 3 times. My businesses that weren't even associated with the cannabis industry have all had their bank accounts shut down at least twice. Those are pretty scary days when you get those FedEx packages and they have a single letter saying, we reserve the right to shut your bank account down, and you have 30 days and we're sending you a cashier's check, and you're like, well, where the hell am I going to put it when you send it to me? And more importantly, it's how do you make the payroll? Right? Because if you don't have a bank account, it's hard to make payroll, and I refuse to pay people in cash because I think that's just a tragedy in the industry from a public safety perspective. So be not afraid of sudden fear. Be resilient. Understand that we're in it for the long haul, and understand that there's also safety in numbers. Right? As much as we're all competitors, we all should be friendly competitors, because together we're going to make this industry stronger. Divided, it will fall apart for sure.
That's great advice. I see that we have less than 10 minutes, and I want to open it up to the floor to see if anybody out there has any questions. Yes, go ahead, please. I don't know if we have a mic. Do we have a mic? I don't know. Any mic? No mic? All right. I'll repeat it if I...
My name is Leo Bridgewater.
Hi, Leo.
I'm a veteran. I'm actually a board member for the Cannabis World Congress Business Expo.
Okay.
So like yourself, I travel around, and I also do a lot of speeches. What I want to know is what is it that you haven't been able to talk about that you really would like to tell us in terms of give us a glimpse of the future? Because a lot of the things that I'm hearing you say were said a couple years ago, right? And it's like, and then I get it because I'm finding a new audience there's a new audience who need to hear the things that you're saying right now. Sure. But those of us who've already heard it before and are already doing it, what are the things that are exciting you that's coming down the line for your product? So those of us who are the talent can be excited along with it.
Sure.
What's the new stuff?
So the question was, what's the new stuff coming down the pike that excites you right now that we weren't talking about 2 years ago?
Right. Thank you for that question, and also thank you for your service. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate the fact that you've been in the industry for how many years? 5 years.
That's in dog years. That's like 25. Yeah. Exactly.
I didn't ask you how long you've
5
been a
years.
consumer.
5 years in this industry is about 20. Yeah, 25.
Yeah. By the way,
years.
you look a hell of a lot better than I do. So a couple things. So first of all, I don't want to do the cop-out thing of, public company. I can't tell you all the secrets because I can't tell you in advance. And I'm not sure that what I'm getting ready to tell you is also going to be new news, because it's not like every single day we wake up and there's some brand new thing that happens. I mean, this is a real industry that takes time to actually continue to move the ball down the field, and we're blocking and tackling all the time. I am excited about the continued evolution of the technology. So, and there's many people that have or talk about water solubility, nano encapsulation, those kind of things. I mean, I believe that if we can make the products in this industry equally comparable to what you would normally do in your other social consumption pattern, whether it's alcohol, beer, whatever that is, and we're talking about a recreational product now. To answer your question, if we can make it analogous so that you know exactly what that product's going to do, how long it's going to take to act, how long it's going to take for it to be out of your system, how you can actually manage that, no different than you manage your normal social consumption of products today. That's a holy grail. And we're not quite there yet. If you think about using oil, we've been cooking with, olive oil for 1,000 years, but we haven't commercially been cooking with cannabis oil for very long. And so we continue to learn and evolve every single day. I think that, the next phase of that is all of the molecules that are in the cannabis plant that we've just scratched the surface of CBG and CBN, and what are those things going to do? And many of those could help us from a social perspective, but a lot of them are going to help us from a wellness platform. And it's how do we get those molecules out? How do we grow them at scale so that we can actually not just make a couple products in the R&D lab, but we can actually make them to appeal to a broad base of consumers or patients? So those are the things that excite me, and they're in the lab. We got to get them out of the lab.
Quicker onset would be, like you said, the nanotechnology, the water solubility, the idea that you don't imbibe a product and then have to wait an hour to know how it's going to make you feel, and it kind of surprises you. It seems like a lot of companies that I've been talking to are really working on that technology.
Yep. Well,
sorry, the what?
The stem and the steam.
The stem and the steam of the industry.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Sure. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Any other questions? A few. You and then in back we'll go.
I'm the owner of a couple of different CBD brands in Wisconsin, and really enjoyed the talk about normalization. And looking at it from the farmer's perspective, where I'm from, it's really changing the stigma around hemp and cannabis. Is that farmers are starting to get real wages for the first time in a long time. They're going from $2,000 an acre on corn of soy, starting to see 40, upwards of 80 for high CBD hemp. And it's really changing the stigma in the community. But my question is, how can we normalize cannabis without normalizing massive industrialized cultivation, and how can we keep cannabis craft and not allow Monsanto to co-opt the entire sector?
So, do you want to repeat the question? It's sort of how to keep basically Monsanto from coming in and kind of taking over the whole the cultivation and growing, and how do we keep it more craft and smaller?
Budweiser and Miller will also
Right.
have these microbreweries. How do we make sure that the microbreweries of cannabis are still
Right.
able to compete in the
I hear this fear a lot that how do we, once we become more normalized, how do we protect the small farmers, the small, the equivalent of a microbrewery in the beer industry from getting swallowed up by the big guys?
Sure. Trevor, thank you for that question.
Thanks, Trevor.
And as I answer it, I'll try because I'm sure a lot of people couldn't hear, so I'll try and repeat the way you asked the question, so thank you. So Trevor's a farmer, right? Or you own CBD businesses, CBD brands?
the wholesale retail extraction space, but I consult with a lot of farmers.
Great. Great. So, how do we continue to enable and empower people in this country to have access to this industry, whether they be farmers who are looking to produce a higher value crop? How do we keep that sustainable as well? And how do we prevent the large companies from getting in and squashing all of the entrepreneurial investment and innovation that has been made? So the second question is going to be harder for me to answer because I think it's inevitable that they're going to come in. But I think you made also an example that we can live with, which is the beer industry. craft beer industry is an incredibly important part of the beer industry, and it's not all dominated by Budweiser. But if you look at the very first real craft brewer of Boston Beer Company, they're a pretty damn big company too, right? So I think that this industry is going to have normalization in terms of some of the commoditization of the product, and that's just a natural course of things. That commoditization, however, is going to allow us to build more brands and more products that will attract a growing base of consumers. So I think the offset of some of that commoditization is an increase in the number of people that actually can enter into the industry as a consumer and have more access, whether that's CBD, which we know now is easier to do from a federal perspective. Ultimately, I believe THC will be there from the standpoint of when you have some form of federal legalization, whether it's states or it's another form down the road, and we can have some interstate commerce, then that allows folks that are in areas where farming is actually economically viable to be able to grow bigger crops and then be the specialists in that with their economies of scale. So now, how do you prevent the Monsantos or the Budweisers or the pharma companies of the world from coming in? I don't think we can.
And they're already coming in.
And they're already coming in, right? What I think we can do, though, is continue to try and have that heritage of craft and higher quality, and it's no different than, Yellowtail or Ernest and Julio Gallo. It makes a hell of a lot of wine, but there's also some really good crafty wines that are out there. They don't have to be $500 a bottle. They could be a little bit more of a premium, and people want to pay for them. And so I think that we can do that in this industry as well.
Do you think specializing and innovation is how the small guys are going to be able to survive in a ever-expanding marketplace?
I think specializing, innovation, and also quality, right? So, a lot of times quality and commodity don't work, right? I mean, commodity is the lowest price and maybe not the best quality. If you want to be a quality producer, focus on the quality, you're going to get a bit of a premium price, and let's figure out how to make that quality go into brands and innovation that demand and hold the margin for people that are willing to pay up for that type of product. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Was one last question? Yeah, I think one last question. Well, I don't care. It says 0 there, but we don't have to. Thanks. We'll repeat the question, I guess.
My name is Michael Waldman. I run an investment firm here in town. And 6 years ago, we started investing into cannabis. So recently, we did an investment in Colombia because the price points to grow and to do the whole thing is a fraction of what it is here stateside. So I'm curious, is that the way? Is it such a commodity that it's important for us to look at that as an investment that will grow internationally? Because assuming that these growers are competent and they have downline sales and relationships, is that a good anchor for this particular investment for us? Acknowledging the fact that the price points are so much lower, $60 versus $300 per pound. That was question number one. If you have time, curious about your thoughts of what role Israel will play in the technology of the whole industry.
What role Israel? Okay. Okay, thank you. Wow.
That's a lot there. So
I made a statement that I love performing without a net, and I'm not 100% sure about that. But thank you for those questions. They're great. So the first question.
Investing in Colombia.
Yeah, thank you. Investing in Colombia. I know a little bit about that, not from an investment perspective, I guess from an investment perspective, because we have a joint venture partnership with Chiron. Chiron is a Colombia or Latin America-based company specializing in the infrastructure for cultivation and distribution through Latin America, including Mexico. Our joint venture is such that it allows us to send our formulas and our form factors and some of our IP to them so they have a faster time to market as those individual regions open up to various forms of cannabis, whether it's CBD or THC. We conversely have the right to import a cosmeceutical line that they've developed in Colombia with CBD in it for distribution in the US. I guess what I would say, first of all, I'm not an investment advisor, and so don't take anything that I say here as whether you should double down or sell.
I'm writing it all down.
You know, I don't know what your time horizon is for your investment, but I don't think that we're going to see the shipment of cannabis across this world anytime in the short near future. I do think that there's certain countries that are willing to allow import and can allow export, but at the end of the day, I think that there's going to be logistical issues with that. I think there's going to be legal issues about that. I think there's still going to be stigma issues about that. And until the whole world has legalized cannabis, I think you're going to see that import-export to be a little bit more problematic. So it's not just what's the price per milligram or what's the price per kilogram of growing it. It's how do you get it from one place to another, and what are the traps that are set up that make that a lot more difficult, and so then you gravitate to, you know, buying it from home, for example. And clearly, you know, Mitch McConnell, you know, has started to come over to our side of as a cannabis warrior somehow, because he's totally focused on his constituency in Kentucky and helping them turn their crop into a more high-yield hemp crop. So I wouldn't dissuade you from your investment in Latin America. I just don't think that we're going to see product shipping all over this world so easily. And you know, even evidence of that is Canada, frankly, and you know, their whole goal of being able to export across the world. And I don't think that's you know, that's tomorrow by any
Same
stretch.
probably goes for Israel. The second part of his question is what you thought was going on in Israel.
The issue from Israel, so I'm not, I apologize, I don't have a whole lot of experience other than what I do know Israel is incredibly good at is research.
Yep.
And I think that again, the way that this industry continues to leapfrog forward and normalize is for more research. And Israel is a leader in research. The US could also have a leadership position in research once the plant is legal here from a federal perspective. And we're seeing some of that research on the CBD side, but clearly not on the THC side. So I would always look to Israel right now as being able to set the pace on innovation and all those other molecules I was referring to before, and how we can really take advantage of those for, you know, for consumers or patients.
And what's amazing is that it's not legal in Israel, well, at least not recreationally legal, and yet they have the best research in the world. All right, I'm going to end it here, I guess, because I think I'm supposed to.
Okay.
Chuck, thank you so much. This has been really enlightening. And
well, thank you. Thank you all for coming. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Chuck. That was great.
I really appreciate it.